there have been times when people would like slam the door in my face, say that I'm like scamming them and things like that. And to their point, I actually found out that I was. We were supposed to tell them that what we were doing was putting them on like a fixed rate for their energy and not a variable rate.
Yeah.
And so I would show them like their rate that they're getting for their gas. And I found out like 3 months in that I had been showing them the wrong number on their bill. But my boss actually said, like, oh, well, at least you got the sale. And I was like, I don't think you understand why this is upsetting to me. Like, I've actually done something terrible to a lot of people.
You were a team trainer for a Cydcor branch in Michigan. You were there for 8 months between 2020 and 2021. How old were you at the time?
When I started, I was actually 18.
Okay. And did you have any other work experience before you got into Cydcor?
Yeah, so mostly what my jobs consisted of were like customer service or like retail, so nothing really like this. Um, I wasn't really prepared for it.
Okay. So, and the reason I asked that is I'm really curious to see like what your impressions were. Because as most people know, Cydcor Smart Circle Credit Code, they are going to target people like you, 18, 19-year-olds, people in college who have little to no work experience because they don't really have an alternative narrative to line this experience up against. So once you got in and you were taught the systems and you finally figured out what you were going to do, like, did it seem strange, or was this just something that you were like, okay, well, this isn't a retail job, this must be something better?
Yeah, so the reason that I think I was so susceptible to like believing everything that they said was because my mom has actually done door-to-door sales before, not for Cydcor. She did it for a company called True Green. It's a lawn care service.
Mhm.
So I was like, okay, so like this just must be like what it's like. Like my mom's done door-to-door sales. It's not a big deal. But like I didn't have any of my own personal experience, so nothing really seemed too off, I guess. I don't know.
So it took me a while to get around to new interviews this year for personal reasons, and some of the people that had reached out to me initially back in earlier this year um, are no longer interested in sharing their story, but you were. Why did you decide, still after all this time, and it's been almost a year, I think, since we talked, that you still wanted to come forward and talk about this?
Um, Mostly I just feel like this is a terrible thing for anyone to get into, even if it's just for like a couple of months. I mean, I lost a lot of money working here, like working here. Um, and the way that they kind of like emotionally manipulate their employees to get them to stay is really scary. And I feel like it's just better if there's some way I could kind of help make sure people don't get into it. Because if I had seen these videos before I started, I definitely would have ran away from my interview. And I feel bad for working here, and I really want to like kind of make it up to myself almost.
So in this Cydcor office, you were doing a couple different door-to-door campaigns. One was Direct Energy, and then one was the Verizon 5G. I know you already said that you have a family background in door-to-door sales with your mother, but what do you remember from these two campaigns? Did you have any issue with the scripts? Did you? I mean, we've all heard the horror stories of people going door to door. So what do you remember about having to go into the field?
Yeah, so with Direct Energy, it was terrible. Um, at least with Verizon, I knew I was actually selling something legitimate. Direct Energy, I still don't even fully understand it. There have been times when people would like slam the door in my face, say that I'm like scamming them and things like that. And to their point, I actually found out that I was because I made a huge mistake because, I was 18. I've never seen an energy bill before. Like I was living in a college dorm. I've never
Right.
paid an actual bill. Um, we were supposed to tell them that what we were doing was putting them on like a fixed rate for their energy and not a variable rate.
Yeah.
And so I would show them like their rate that they're getting for their gas. And I found out like 3 months in that I had been showing them the wrong number on their bill. And so I may have raised a couple of rates. And I feel terrible about that because like we were going to like not very well off neighborhoods.
Yeah.
But my boss actually said, like, oh, well, at least you got the sale. And I was like, I don't think you understand why this is upsetting to me. Like, I've actually done something terrible to a lot of people. But yeah, it was pretty sketchy. Verizon, I mean, like I said, I kind of like I have Verizon. I've had it previously to this.
Mhm.
So I really like Verizon and it was nice to actually sell something legitimate, but just the experience of going out and bothering people and asking them like what their internet is, like, I don't know, it's really uncomfortable and it kind of feels like I'm at like a standard of like just going out and begging for money.
Yeah. So were you ever concerned, like when you raised the issue with your manager about having raised rates and he didn't seem to care? Did you ever get concerned about the fact that you were lying to people or just committing these acts that from an ethical perspective are pretty borderline at best? And did you ever consider, well, maybe this isn't where I should be in my life?
Yeah, like I said, I was pretty upset by it when I
Mhm.
found out. Because like sometimes we'd even be in like trailer parks, not nice ones,
Yeah.
and it was before I found out. And like I know these people like think that I was genuinely helping them, and I found out that I might not have been. And when he said that, it did upset me because I was like, well, I mean, yeah, I made a sale. I made like what, like $45 out of it. But
Yeah.
in the grand scheme of things, is $45 worth like potentially messing up someone's energy bill? And I did get upset at him for it. And my leader at the time, he was like, oh, that's just Mark. Like, don't worry about it. Like, that's just how he is. Like, we'll make corrections going forward. So I was like, okay. I have a lot of bad field experiences. Working out of Detroit, we go to some pretty rough neighborhoods. Um, Particularly, we went to a lot of trailer parks because they were seen as like gold mines because the stereotype that people that live in trailer homes are stupid and broke is basically what they thought at my office. Um, and that especially was like that when we were doing direct energy. So we would go to these like really like shoddy places. Like I remember one time, I went out with Mark on a Saturday, or no, a Sunday because I took Saturday off, and that was unacceptable. And so he took me to this trailer park, like in, man, where was it? I don't know, some really like unsafe city. I can't remember which one it was. We've been to so many. It might have been in like the part of Dearborn that kind of connects to Detroit.
Mhm.
Um, and so we went there and he was like 3 hours late. So we didn't get there until like 7:30 p.m. And so it's super dark out. This place is like disgusting. And it's really bad. And I remember he was like, okay, you're gonna go this way and I'm gonna go that way. And I was like, no, I'm just gonna stay with you because I really feel like if I go by myself, I'm gonna get like kidnapped.
Mhm.
Like it was really, really bad. And he looked so stupid. He was walking around with like his big direct energy coat on because it's like the middle of winter. And he had like one of those like forehead lights on. So he's like knocking on people's door with a forehead light on in the middle of like essentially like the ghetto. And I'm like, you look like a cop. Like, what are you doing? And he got like some note from this woman saying that her mom needed the direct energy service too. And so he got her name and then he got her number, her address, and went up to her trailer and starts knocking on the window going, Carol, open up, Carol, open up, like beating on the window. And I was just like, how is this man like real? I don't understand it. This is like the most outlandish thing I've ever seen in my life. So that day was pretty bad. We've had like snowstorms where we went out. And I have like a circulation problem, so I really cannot be out in the freezing cold because like my feet will literally like I could get like what is it called? Frostbite. I could get
Yeah.
frostbite. Um, but I went out still. And I had told them this, and they're like, oh, just wear extra layers. You'll be fine. I'm like, I really don't think that you're like the right person to be telling me this. Like, you're not my doctor. But yeah, so we would go out in snowstorms, and I remember like literally walking, trudging through like 3 feet of snow, like knocking on people's doors in the middle of a snowstorm, asking if I could see their gas bill. And it was like the most humiliating experience of my life. And by the end of the day, like I could not feel my feet. It felt like I was like dragging my feet along as I was walking because I could barely move them. And I remember asking to take a break because I have like a medical reason to. And they'd be like, okay, let's just do one more loop around, one more. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't. Like, it is painful to walk right now. So there were a lot of those days. Um, there was a period of time where we were sent to Dearborn every day because apparently nobody had gone there. And we had a lot of Arabic speaking people in our office. So we would like group up with them in case like, somebody didn't speak English that well. And one time I was with this girl, Shams. I'm still friends with her. She's very sweet. Um, and we were like a block apart from each other. And she had called me like in tears, like crying. She's like, oh my God, I don't know what to do. Somebody like just tried to grab me into their house, like, and like tried to like solicit me for like sex, basically. Um, and all these things, and she's freaking out. And she's like, and I'm like, well, did you tell Mark? Should we go somewhere else? Like, should we take the day off? Like, what do you think we should do? And she's like, Mark just said to keep going. And I couldn't even believe it. I was like, he said to keep going, like in the same neighborhood. She's like, yeah, just he said just go a block over. So I'm gonna go meet up with you. And I was like, okay, well, we're not doing that because we're both young girls and we're not gonna be in this neighborhood anymore by ourselves. I was like, we're gonna go get lunch and call Mark and tell him that we're not walking through here ever again. And I remember talking to Mark about it, and he was like, oh, well, as long as you guys are together, it shouldn't be a big deal. And I was like, no, like, that's really not how it works. Like, unless there's like a guy here with us, like, we don't want to be here. We actually don't want to be here at all. We would much rather go to like a safer neighborhood where people aren't trying to kidnap us. I don't know why that's so much to ask. And I got really mad at him about it because he just wasn't understanding the problem with that.
Do you know, is he your boss, Mark? Is he still in the business, or was he as successful as he claimed to have been? Do you know?
Um, I really don't think so because everything that anyone has ever said about him has been bad. Like, so his promoting owner was Shaine Thurman, and so the guy that promoted him out was Ken Lear, and Ken Lear had visited us, and essentially like I heard from a bunch of people that he was like basically talking shit about Mark to his like people that he brought the whole time, saying that he's a joke and all this stuff. Our guy, my leader, that I worked with the whole time, he's been there for like 2 years. um he said that he's just like running the place into the ground. I'm like, well, like, I mean, it's kind of not hard. Like, this company doesn't make any sense. to me. Um, but yeah, he was not a good owner. Everybody kind of saw him as like a laughing stock, basically. Nobody really liked him. Um,
People will hear that and again dismiss your whole story, even though the things you've talked about has nothing to do with ownership, but they'll just dismiss it as, well, he's a bad owner, get over it. But you know, did you kind of, when you met with these other regional consultants or whomever, did you get the impression that this business was legitimate in any way?
no. That was actually one of the driving reasons why I left. Ken Lear, I thought, was kind of a snob and also kind of like a con artist. I kind of got that he was very fake.
Yeah.
I mean, this guy shows up in like this like super fancy suit and he's got like it looked like a fake Rolex. It could have been real, but I think it looked fake. Like one of those knockoff ones that you would find at the mall or something.
Mhm.
Um, and he basically just talked about how hard it was for him in the field when he started, and now he's so well off and he barely has to work anymore. And like his guys make like $1,000 a week and all this stuff. And I'm like, okay, well, I mean, you're kind of just copy and pasting everything that all these other like consultants say. So how was anyone supposed to take you seriously? Also, he had just this like facade about him or this energy about him, like he just can't even look anyone in the eye because he's too good for them.
Mhm.
And I'm like, this is really who I'm supposed to be looking up to in the business? Like this guy is kind of a douchebag.
Oh yeah, you're not the first person who's brought up Ken Lear, and I would agree. Yeah, based on everything I've heard, he's a giant douchebag,
Yeah.
scam artist, con artist. Ken Lear seems to fit all those things. Something you mentioned earlier was emotional manipulation, which is a pretty consistent theme in these videos. How did you notice that?
Every time I tried to leave.
Okay.
Yeah, so they they would do those like opportunity meeting
Oh yeah.
things and they would like go around the room and ask everyone what their like personal goals are. And being a leader, you had to set goals for yourself every week, which is
Mhm.
like ridiculous. I have
Yeah.
the same goal every week.
Yeah.
um but yeah, and so they would, and like they all got to know you really personally too because they're like the only people that you see. um and so a lot of them I was really close with. I thought they were really, really nice people. Some people I still talk to today. They're not in the business anymore. Um, but yeah, every time I would try to leave, they would kind of like throw my personal goals in my face and be like, "Oh, you're not going to be able to achieve this working at like another restaurant or another like retail store and things like that." And um, it got to be a lot where like every time I would try to quit, it would just be like, "You're not quitting." And I was like, "Oh, I guess I'm not quitting." I don't know why. I was very naive. Um, but there would be days I would just go and sit in my car all day, which is also another common theme for people that work in these offices.
You, in your message, you brought up some very troubling accusations about what goes on in these offices, and we'll touch on that in a minute. And
Mm.
this may, those accusations may have played a role in the question I'm going to ask you, but you just talked about every time I tried to leave, so that means you had thought about it multiple times that you were leaving. So what were some of the causes of those different, I guess, desires of not wanting to be there anymore?
Yeah, so it started off as just basically I wasn't making enough money. Um, I had to pay, like I had dropped out of college before I started, but I was
Mhm.
still living in like the college dorms. So I had a monthly rent to pay,
Yeah.
and it was like $900 a month or $800 a month, something like that. And I was just barely scraping by. Um, and like one day I spent like my last $3 on like a Coke and fries from McDonald's on my break. Um, and so I kind of just like stepped back. I was like, I can't do this. Like, I don't have time to see anybody. I don't have any money. Like, I've had to ask my dad for money for my rent like 3 times already. This is ridiculous. Um, but then, my boss was like, oh, well, like, we're just going to get you there. We're getting you through a rough patch and all these things. And like, so I ended up staying for a little bit longer. And another reason I wanted to quit was um, just a bunch of like inappropriate behavior in the office. We had one person that came in and he would like sexually harass like every woman in the office. And when I brought this up to our HR person or our admin, she was like, oh, not in my office. This isn't going to happen. And then didn't do anything about it. So I kind of like had to take that matter into my own hands. And I went up to the guy and I was like, you're going to leave these girls alone. Like, they don't want anything to do with you. You're ruining their work experience and blah, blah, blah. And then I think he finally got fired after like 3 more months of that. Um, and just kind of like another reason was my boss. He was very like self-centered. He would flaunt his like weekly checks at us, like, oh, you guys made this much? Well, I actually make like 1.5 times whatever you make, and this is how big my check is. And we're just like, okay, if you say so, because I know you live with like 2 other guys. As like a
Yeah.
34-year-old man.
Yeah. And one point, let me tell you this, as a Cydcor owner, you should be making way more than 1.5 times what your sales reps are making. So that's
Mhm.
nothing to brag about, dude. That means you're,
Yeah.
you're doing something wrong if it's only 1.5 times. But anyway, um, so
Yeah.
you said you knew that he was living with 2 other people. How was that something that was attempted to be kind of avoided in the office, or was that common knowledge?
That was common knowledge.
Hmm,
Our office was actually shared at one point when I started
hmm.
with his person that he promoted out, John. Um, and he shared his house with him too. And another guy that used to work with them, but he since quit and moved down to like, I think he does like real estate or something, or mortgage loans, something like that. But they all live together. And I know this just because team nights were like 80% of the time at his house. So he wasn't very ashamed of it. I don't
Okay.
know.
Well, and if he's only making 1.5 times what you guys are making, I mean, he can't really afford to go out for team nights. So it just makes sense, I guess, to have it in the house.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's been a theme over some videos over racial discrimination, or at least the perception of racial discrimination in these offices. Which, I mean, if there's going to be sexual harassment and sexism and ageism, why wouldn't there be racial discrimination? What were some of the things you noticed in that regard?
So, um, with Cydcor, or like at least our office, it was pretty common knowledge that they would hire anybody that lives and breathes and talks.
Yeah.
um we had hired we had hired a bunch of people. There was at one point a Vietnamese guy that worked with us. His name was Johnny. He was very nice. And then we had, because we're in Detroit and we're kind of by Dearborn, so
Yeah.
there was a lot of Arabic people that had worked with us. And I remember one time during an opportunity meeting, Mark, my boss, was like talking to us about like where we could be and where we are. And he was talking about how Johnny, the Vietnamese guy, he could have been at his mom's nail salon or something, and like started like imitating what he thinks his mom would sound like in like a kind of like derogatory way. And I think he quit like the day after. And I was like, yeah, I can't blame you. I really can't.
Right.
That's really offensive. And then there was a common theme of pretty much everyone in the office like referring to our Arabic coworkers as Habibis. Um, yeah, that joke got old quick. It really did. Um, and a lot of our, I mean, like we had this one girl that worked with us, and She was black, but and she dressed very nice, and she was very pretty and always very professional. And Mark would call her like Nicki Minaj all the time. And I'm just like,
Jesus.
dude. And he would say like he would like use the fact that he's foreign as like an excuse for him just being blatantly racist and sexist. He'd be like, "Oh, I'm foreign. Sorry, guys, I don't know." And it's like you moved to America from Russia when you were like 8.
If you
You don't
use
have
that,
that
if you
excuse.
use that as an excuse, dude, you
Yeah.
know. So you brought up team nights before, and I think probably the most troubling part of your message was the accusations you make about alcohol use and other substance use on team nights, essentially being forced upon people like you who were underage. So if you don't mind, could you shed a little bit of light on that and what you saw happen?
Yeah, so that's kind of like a whole can of worms. It kind of would just like start off as like we'd be at team night, either at Mark and John's house or like at like a bowling alley or something. And he would always offer us drinks, like everybody, the whole team. And like I was like, okay, well, this is kind of weird because my boss is like 30 something and I'm 18. And so like originally I was like, no, I'm good. Like I have to drive home, you know. And my house, I lived in Dearborn myself actually. So it was to his house like a 40-minute drive. So there was no way I was gonna make a drive home under the influence,
Right.
like that's just out of the question. Um, and then eventually he just started like offering drinks to everybody. And I will be honest, a couple of times I was like, yeah, like sure, like I just worked like a 12-hour day, why not? Like my
Mhm.
boss is cool, whatever. um Very, very naive I was. And then there was like, yeah, they would be smoking and everything too. Like John, who was the other manager at the time, he would offer me like weed and things like that, and I was like really uncomfortable by it because I'm like 18 and they're like in their 30s. It was just really weird. And like I'm at their house too, so it's kind of strange. Um but I think the most uncomfortable situation regarding alcohol was and I'm not going to say her name because I don't want any bad will or anything against her. But there was someone that we worked with and I had gotten particularly close to her, and we would hang out like outside of work and things like that. And she would always like have a drink in her hand. And I just like started to pick up on it. And I was like, okay. And this is weird.
Mhm.
Um, and at team nights, like they didn't care, like they didn't like question it or anything. They would like give her drinks all the time, like, oh, you want another drink? You want another shot? Yeah, like go ahead. And it got to the point where I was like I brought it up to my manager and I brought it up to another manager that we knew from Ohio who would visit a lot because she was close with her too. And they were like, "Oh, that's just how she is. Like nothing to be worried about. Like she's got it. She's fine." And I'm like, "I think she has like a serious drinking problem that nobody's talking about and everyone's just kind of enabling her instead of helping her."
Yeah.
And it kind of just um imploded onto itself, and it got to a point where they had to have like a serious like sit down intervention with her, which like I'm surprised they even did that because they were enabling her the whole time.
Mhm.
It was really bad. So yeah, drinking and other substance abuse was not uncommon at my office. There was a rumor going around about my boss like being like a coke addict or something. I don't know if it's true, but it was definitely something that I heard a lot, which I don't know if it would surprise me or not.
Mhm.
But yeah.
Mhm. When you were in those situations, when you were at the house, and you kept turning them down most of the time, did you ever feel any like intense pressure to conform aside from the fact that you were underage, but just this whole idea of in Cydcor, you pretty much have to follow the line, otherwise you're going to be ostracized. So did you ever feel any extra pressure for those reasons?
Um, I would say yes, just because there were other underage people there too. It wasn't just me. They would all drink and they would be like, oh, like, don't worry about it. It's just like being at a party and like he's not gonna snitch on us or anything.
Mhm,
And I just remember really thinking that's really not what I'm worried about. I don't think he's gonna snitch on us if he's giving us alcohol.
mhm.
Um, I'm worried about how I'm gonna get home. Uh, but yeah, there was kind of like some pressure around it, but also at the same time, like as I progressed through Cydcor, I was like getting increasingly more like depressed and I was more susceptible to things like that, I would
Mhm.
say. Um, so in the beginning, yeah, there was like kind of like a pressure to like conform, I guess.
Okay, so what ended up being the final straw? You were there for 8 months. So what got you out, and how did your boss react to that?
Yeah, so I had a pretty shoddy record towards the end of my time there. I was making like 2 to 3 sales a week on Verizon, which is like $300 paychecks, which amounted to like $75 after taxes. um, and I remember I had a critical conversation with my leader many times and with Mark, my boss. And I just told him, I was like, I don't see myself doing sales for the rest of my life. Like, I feel like I was kind of forced into wanting to be an owner. I really don't want to be. And I hate doing sales. It makes me feel like pathetic, basically. And I like it's just making me depressed. And he was like, okay, well, why don't you work with our admin on like some PR things and maybe because he knew I was into like design and things like that. Like I wanted to go to art school. Um, and he's like, maybe that'll be like a way to like refresh and like kind of take a break. And I was like, okay, why not? Of course I didn't get paid for it. So I still had to do sales and that. So basically just more free work. They
Mhm.
love doing that.
Yeah.
And so I was doing that for a while and I kind of had an epiphany. I was like, so if our admin can make this terrible, horrible company look great online, she probably knows what she's doing. And I know she has a degree in PR. So I was like, I'm just gonna take up all the training that I can here, and then I'm gonna split and either do this somewhere else or just go to school.
Mhm.
And I ended up doing both after I quit. Um, but yeah, so that's kind of how it went. Like I just learned everything about PR that I could, and then I basically couldn't take it anymore.
Mhm.
And I was like, hey, can't do this. This is just not profitable for me. Like I have made zero money essentially. Um, and I'm extremely depressed. So I gotta go. And I originally gave a 2 weeks notice, but I ended up leaving before that just out of sheer exhaustion and the fact that I wasn't actually going to the field most of the time. And Mark was kind of like, because, he could kind of tell I was at the end of my rope and I wasn't really doing anything for him, like profit wise. So he was like, okay, like, you're good, just go.
You were there only for 8 months, but considering how much these false opportunities, these scam companies take up your life, consume you. And you had said earlier that you had asked your dad, I think it was 3 times, to cover your rent, even though you were working. Was there ever any conversations with him or anyone else in your support system about what you had gotten yourself into aside from the sales aspect of it?
Um, Not really, because I never asked for like the full amount of my rent, just like $200 to $300. Um, I mean, this is kind of weird to say because I never really fully addressed it. My dad and my mom actually back in the day got themselves into an Amway
Mm,
pyramid scheme. And they never told me until after I told them all of this after I quit. And I was like, you guys, like I literally was in the same thing. Like, how did you not see the signs? So I was pretty upset about it. But I mean, at the same time, I was moved out. I was 18. Like, I don't know. I don't know.
mhm.
I feel like they should have told me. Um, But I mean, I also didn't really discuss my work with them that much because I didn't want them to think like I didn't know what I was doing because I wanted to be independent and all this stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, you're kind of the Cydcor poster child or Devil Court poster child in a way, because you're so young, um, really inexperienced when it comes to the working world, but you want to be independent. You want to make your own money. You want to not have to live off your parents, and which is, an admirable trait, obviously, but sometimes at that point you can want it so bad that you're willing to accept anything. So that's why, in other videos, people are willing to go on road trips and sleep in roach infested strangers' houses and, go door to door at 9 o'clock at night in seedy
Mhm.
neighborhoods. And they accept that as normal. They think, oh, well, this is just what I have to do. And of course it isn't normal. And because you're so young and you represent so much of what these companies want in people, is there any way that you think like your story or some other way of approaching this can help influence 18, 19-year-olds who were like you, who want that independence, and they're flash these fancy numbers at Cydcor, so they're going to take this position without really ever realizing what it is?
Yeah. So basically, I mean, the best thing I could say is after I left Cydcor, I worked at Chick-fil-A, right? I was there. I mean, most of the time I just was a back of house general worker.
Mhm.
But I also ran their marketing, like their Instagram and their Facebook. I made more money there in 7 months than I made in the 8 or 9 months that I worked at Cydcor, like a substantial amount of money.
Mhm.
Like the numbers that they throw at you don't add up. If someone's telling you that you're gonna make like $50,000 a year your first year in an entry level position, and they don't even tell you what the position is, like it just doesn't add up. It
Mhm.
doesn't make any sense. I wish that I would have kind of paid more attention during my interview to those little tiny clues that they would kind of leave like that, like where they would just leave out information and then they would say something about commission on like, and I'd be like, what do you mean commission?
Mhm.
I thought it was a salary base. And things like that. And I really wish I would have looked up the reviews because I looked up the reviews after I quit and they were all from people that work there and they were all like the exact like same copy and paste type
Mhm.
review, you know.
Yeah.
And, like I was thinking like if I would have looked at that, I would have had like some sort of suspicion, you know.
Mhm.
I don't know, just maybe just being more observant, being more um I don't know, like hard-minded about things instead of just being fully in on like some big numbers or some good news or something like that.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know. Really
Okay.
just try to think critically about things.
It's been a couple weeks since we talked, but I know that you had reached out and said that there were some things that you either slipped your mind or we didn't get a chance to talk about in the first interview. So I'll just go ahead and open it up to you. What were some of the other things you wanted to share?
I wanted to talk a lot about consistent like paychecks being short and kind of like the Verizon sales system and like the whole group me thing that we had to go through.
Mhm.
Um but yeah, with our paychecks being short, it was like really often that would happen. Sorry about my voice. I'm getting over COVID.
That's okay. Do you think was it anything that your owner was doing, or why do you think they were short so much?
I honestly don't know the true answer to that, but it's been kind of like the running office like theory that he would like skim money off our paychecks. Um, like for example, one of my friends that I worked there with, she was really good at sales. Like she just like would make like technically $1,000 weeks every week, but she like just recently told me she never made a check over $400. which is pretty alarming given
Yeah.
that she should have been making 1,000 before taxes.
So you said this was a running joke in a sense. So this was kind of widely known or widely discussed that the money was not there that should have been there.
It was more like widely discussed, like, well, I mean, more so after we left,
Yeah.
because none of us would really talk about it because that would be like negging everyone out. Um, but yeah, it was like after the fact we started talking about it. I was like, like I've had some good weeks, but I only got paid like $500 tops. And they're like, me too. And I was like, oh, I thought it was just me. So yeah, we would talk about that a lot. There was actually one time, and this always sticks out to me because I can't believe that I did this. Um, so I was on my like 16th or 17th sale of the week, and in order to get $1,000, I would have to make 20 in the week, and this was on a Saturday. So I should have went home at like 1.
Mhm.
um, but it was like, geez, it was getting dark out. I don't remember exactly what time it was, maybe like 8 or 9 o'clock. And my leader goes, "You're not coming inside until you get your 20th sale." As in, I'm not eating, I'm not getting like nothing. And I really stayed out until I got my 20th sale. And I was like, okay, cool. Well, I'm gonna get $1,000, so whatever. And I got paid like maybe 500. And yeah, I was really mad about it. And then I remember I confronted my boss about it, and he was like, "Oh, well, you had a bunch of cancels. It is what it is." And I was like, "Not really. This is kind of my livelihood."
Yeah. Yeah. And they'll always hide behind that, right? Because you get paid pending the installations. And if they decide to cancel, then you're pretty much SOL about that. But um you really, I wonder if you kind of, if they keep records of that, even like if you demanded to see like, well, who signed up and who didn't, if you could kind of compare the numbers and see if they were in fact telling the truth. I'm sure most of the time they weren't telling the truth, but it's a convenient thing to hide behind the cancellations because they figure, oh well, there's really no reason to suspect that I, as the owner, am not telling the truth. No red flags have been raised, so I can pretty much just tell them that, and they have to believe it, which is unfortunate.
Yeah. Well, with Verizon, one of my old coworkers actually did catch him lying about it. Because with Verizon, we had to keep in contact with all of our customers like 24/7. It was crazy. Um, and he said, "Oh, this person canceled. That's why your check is short." And so he called that customer and he was like, "Hey, did you get your installation? Everything's taken care of?" And he was like, "Oh yeah, it's great, thanks." And so basically, I think he like confronted him about it, and then he ended up just like Venmoing him or something. GroupMe was ridiculous. We had to like update our boss constantly on everything we did. Like we had to tell him in GroupMe when we left the office, even though he saw us walk out the door. And then we had to let him know when we got to the field. And then every time we make a sale, it gets posted in GroupMe. Um, Anytime we were like working on a sale, gets posted in GroupMe, like just ridiculous. And then like when we leave, when we go on lunch breaks, and if you didn't update in the GroupMe, you would get like a conversation about it later. So GroupMe I always thought was really invasive and weird and like kind of insecure almost, like it's weird. Um, and with the Verizon sales system, we had to like we had the iPads, right?
Yeah.
And for every single house, we had to like mark it on our iPad, the interaction we had, whether or not we think that they're gonna buy or whatever. And then like just it was really weird. It was a lot. So on top of that, they could see everything that we were doing. So like if you're having a bad day and you want to take a break, um, our boss would be texting us being like, "So why aren't you doing anything?" And it was so weird. So yeah, like he would see how long I would be on a break, like how long I'm talking to somebody, all that stuff. It was so invasive. And I think it's really weird that Verizon kind of just gave that kind of like kind of opened the door for that type of activity. I don't know.
And that's just obviously that's just a way to control you, to monitor you, to make sure that you're doing the right thing, to make sure you're being honest, which is kind of weird because if they're stealing money from your paychecks, that's the
Yeah,
opposite of being honest, but they expect you to be honest. So it's kind of hypocritical, I think, on their part for sure.
definitely a double standard, at least.
Yeah.
Also with Verizon, we had, like I said, we had to keep in contact with all of our customers all the time. And like that was on our personal phones. And like I still have like dozens of customers like contact information in my phone. I still have people that contact me personally, even though I haven't worked there for almost a year now. Actually over a year. Yeah. I know, yeah, it was just like all the time. Like even when I got home, I still had to like talk to customers and make sure they were still on board with the whole Verizon thing, because God knows if they have one missed thought, or one wrong thought, like there's my money out the door.
Yeah.
Um, and then apparently there were like, um, oh yeah, we had to like activate phones too, which I didn't know anything about that. I was like 18 and I was like, I don't know, like I've never used a Samsung. But I had to help these random people inside their houses like
Yeah.
activate phones. And I was like, okay, I mean, I guess I'll figure it out. That was annoying. And apparently there were like Verizon bonuses. I did not know that because we never got them.
Yeah, the bonuses, I think that kind of depends on the owner that you have. Some are they use it as a motivational tool, but then others, they tend to gloss over that information, so that they maybe keep it for themselves because they're not making any money.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, that's kind of when I figured what was happening when I found out there were Verizon bonuses. I remember one time he actually did tell us about it, and then we never heard anything about it after like the time period ended. We're just like, oh, all right. I guess we're forgetting about that.
Mhm.
Um, there was one or two other things I wanted to mention too, if that's okay.
Sure, of course.
So I might have mentioned last time that we talked, something about like my car being driven too much to where I don't know if I did or not, but I drove my car a lot. It was like 45 minutes to and from the office and then to the field and all that. Um, but I remember there was like 2 weeks I had to drive an hour to the field every day. And I also had to drive this other leader, the guy that was like sexually harassing everybody, and his new start for 2 weeks straight, and drop them off at the field because he didn't have a car.
Mhm.
And I just remember thinking, well, that's not my problem. He's 24. He should have a car. Like,
Right.
um, and like I don't know, it kind of bothered me because I didn't want to be driving this much in the first place. Then I have to drop him off wherever he was and then go all the way to my spot. And then I think I told Mark about it, my boss, and he was like, oh, well, he just doesn't have a car and needs help. And I was like, okay, but like, I don't want to do it. I'm sick of it. It's been
Mhm.
2 weeks of this. And he was like, okay, well, I'll drive him from now on. And I think he drove him one time. Out of 2 weeks, he drove him one time. So that was super annoying. I was just like, I remember telling my dad about that, and he was like, why is he making you drive someone else? That's so weird. Like, you shouldn't have to bring people into your personal property. I was like, I know.
Yep.
That was really annoying. But yeah, as far as my car goes, I had an overheating engine. 3 of my tires blew out on the clock, technically.
Mhm.
I got into a car accident and my car's motor ended up just quitting on me, and I got zero compensation for any of that. Not surprising. Yeah, and then after my car accident, I had a concussion, and I was on the way to team night, by the way. I got into this accident and they actually made me continue driving to team night after that. They're like, "Oh, you're going to come out, right? It's not that bad." And I was like, "I don't know, my head kind of hurts. I don't know if I should." But I ended up driving there, and I ended up finding out the next day that I had a concussion and I probably shouldn't have been driving.
Yeah.
I didn't get any paid time off after, I think I was gone for like a week or so after that. I didn't get any sort of pay for that, which I don't know, that seems pretty standard to get paid when you have an injury.
Yeah,
But
and I'm assuming that um you felt like you had to be there for team night. Like even if I mean, you had this accident, you felt weird. You didn't know you had a concussion yet, but yeah, I would think that if I felt anything off, that I'd probably be like, I'm not gonna go there. I gotta make sure I'm okay. And I think any reasonable place would be like, sure, yeah, take care of yourself, whatever. But here, there's no reasonable. There's no anything that sounds normal, anything that is normal is not the way that these companies, Smart Circle, Cydcor, Credico operate. They expect you to be there, and it's a part of your brainwashing. Is that they require you to be there, and it seems like any reason to think that you might not get to something, even though it has nothing to do with sales. It's just this stupid team night for a couple hours, so to prevent you from getting home at a reasonable hour, to make
mhm,
you even more tired. But again, that's part of the buy-in, part of the manipulation.
yeah, I mean, I don't even know why I continued driving. It was, yeah, it was like that though. I did feel like I had to be there for some reason. I don't know. Yeah, I just thought that was crazy that they were like, "Oh yeah, just keep driving." Like I just got into an accident.
Mhm.
Um, so after I quit, I wrote a Google review on this place
Mhm.
because I was like, I need to do something to like make up for all this lost time and like the fact that I interviewed people to work there and all that. Um, and so I wrote an honest review about everything. I said, like, this is basically like being in a cult. Like, don't work here. Like, our boss is insane. Like, you're not going to get paid well. Slave labor, all this stuff, like old news. Um, and not even 5 minutes go by, and I had like been out of this place for like a couple months at this point. I've never had any contact with my boss since I left, like none. And like 5 minutes after I posted that, he texted me and he's like, dang, I didn't know we ruined your life. And I thought we actually helped you out and all this stuff. And I was like, when did you ever help me with anything? Like, I actually lost money working there. I was like living off McDonald's. Like, it was terrible. And I was like, well, I'm not gonna lie, like it was the worst job I've ever had in my life. And I don't know how you can like run a business like this. And then I don't remember what he said after that, but just some bullshit basically. Yeah. And then he ended up deleting it. And I have tried to put another one up since just to like, I don't know, be petty. I like can't, like it won't let me. Um Oh yeah, I think he also like withheld people's W-2s, which is pretty crazy. But he ended up giving me mine because I don't know. I think he's scared of me or something. Maybe not, but I don't know. I think I'm just pretty abrasive.
I mean, anybody that's willing to tell the truth about these companies, they should be scared of, because they don't like the truth. They will go to any length to prevent the truth, like any cult, right? Like any religious or personality or political cult, they'll go to any length to make sure that the truth either isn't known, or they try to muddy the truth a little bit. So that's like, I could interview 1,000 people, but they'll still say, oh, these are just a bunch of failures. I mean, we know we're not failures. We know the truth, but they rationalize it that way, that we're just bitter. I honestly could care less about this stuff. The only reason I keep doing these videos is I keep getting requests to do these, so I kind of feel like I have an obligation to. So I personally don't care. But I don't know any of you all make the point of reaching out and saying, something's not right here. I need to tell my story because other people need to be aware of this, and they can live in whatever alternative reality they want, but eventually the truth is going to win out. And that's why they're scared of these videos. That's why they literally tell people, don't watch these videos. That's why they try to scare their employees into signing like NDAs, non-disclosure agreements. And if you say anything bad, we could come sue you, which, I mean, the teeth of those things that you sign are so weak anyway. But the fact of the matter is that these individual companies, they don't have any money whatsoever to try any kind of lawsuits. So they're helpless in that regard. So I think that's another motivation. I mean, if someone watching this video, if this speaks to you, if you have a story, they can't do anything to you. So write a blog about it, do a video about it, just get it out there, because the more stories that are out there about how these scam companies operate, the clearer the picture becomes, the harder it's going to be for them to operate. And they're going to have to keep adapting, which I'm sure they will do. They will continue to scam people, but it's not going to make it any easier for them if the truth is in fact out there for people to find.
I mean, like if you have to make someone sign an NDA when they quit, I mean, that just speaks for itself. I'm just
Yeah.
saying, personally, that's never happened to me, but
Yeah.
that's pretty extreme.
Yep.